So I'm really excited to introduce our next panel. I think you're going to really enjoy what all the students have to say. It will be moderated by Ryann Garcia. Ryann Garcia she's a third-year law student at UCLA, and she serves as the co-president of the Native American Law Students Association and a 3L rep for the Latinx Law Students Association. She is originally from San Bernardino, California, and she holds BAs in Religious Studies and Classical Civilizations from UCLA, as well as an MA in Religion from Yale University. Ryann is also a California Change Lawyers Scholar, a UCLA Law Fellows mentor, and a symposium editor for the UCLA Law Review. She has worked for the UCLA Tribal Legal Development Clinic, the UCLA Law Human Rights in Action Clinic, BETSETIC Legal Services, and is currently clerking for Rosette LLP. She has also competed in the 28th and 29th annual National NALSA Moot Court competitions and received the National NALSA Award for 2L of the Year and the third place award in the 2021 writing competition. Ryann's areas of interests are federal and tribal Indian law, cultural rights and sacred place protections, international human rights law, and critical race theory. She's incredibly accomplished and just overall badass, so she's going to be a great moderator for this panel, and I will pass it to Ryann.
Thanks so much, Katie. That was quite an introduction, but I appreciate it, and I'm glad to be here with you all today. I also participated in FPOC last year, and so I'm excited to be back this year moderating the same panel. Just like last year, it's so amazing to do these types of events because all of my friends are here. Everyone who's here and does these events and puts in the work to do this type of labor and community love, we're all friends with one another. And so I just really love the community that I hope that you all as audience members can see that is possible to build in places like law school. So again, my name is Ryann Garcia. I know that there's probably already a land acknowledgement today, but I just do again want to acknowledge the Gabrielino and Tongva peoples as the original caretakers of this land and acknowledge that I'm grateful to work for them in this place. So let's just go ahead and get started with our panelists. I'll have each of you say your name, your school year, when you plan to graduate, your hometown, where you went to undergrad, if you took any gap years. Sorry, this is a lot, so I'll paste in the chat. Which law program and specialization you're in, and things that you're a part of, organizations, journals, and clinics. And then we'll do kind of the basics where you worked. So I'm going to go ahead and post that in the chat, but I'm going to start with Grace.
Hi, sorry, my Wi-Fi is not the best, so sorry if I cut out. Yes, my name is Grace. My pronouns are she, her. I am a 2L here at UCLA Law. I will be graduating in 2022. My family moved around a lot, mostly due to just, housing insecurity and being low income. But I was born in Oklahoma and my family now lives in New Mexico. I went to the University of Denver in Colorado, where I majored in journalism and political science with an English minor. I did not take any gap years. I went straight through. And I am currently enrolled in the Critical Race Studies program, the Public Interest Law program, and the International Law program here at UCLA Law. I'm particularly interested in public interest law and criminal legal reform. I am also interested in federal Indian law and particularly in restorative justice practices and systems on reservations. I participated in a lot, for those who know me, here at UCLA Law, but some of the main things was being co-president of the Native American Law Student Association. I was also co-chair for the National Lawyers Guild at UCLA. I am a senior editor for the UCLA Law Review. I'm communication chair for the Criminal Justice Society, and just involved in various other organizations. Yeah, and then, sorry, I'm just looking at this list. And then where I worked last summer, I worked as a judicial extern for the Supreme Court in New Mexico. This summer, I'll be working at the ACLU Capital Punishment Project. And yeah, that's it.
Yes, the whole book that is Grace's resume. Thanks so much. That's why I wanted to start with you. But okay, let's move along. Jackie, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi all, my name is Jackie. I use she, her, they pronouns. School, I'm also a 2L, so I'll be graduating May, spring of 2022, or hopefully. Hometown home, I guess LA is home. I'm specifically on the Chumash land, where home is undergrad. So I went to a really small liberal arts college called Middlebury. My major was gender, sexuality, feminist studies. Gap years, I took a 4 years. So I graduated undergrad in 2015 and started law school in 2019. So during the gap years, I worked for a couple of years at legal aid, providing free legal services for low income and houseless folks within Los Angeles. And then I took a year off because I had a really terrible time in undergrad. And then went straight into working. So I took a year off. So I actually deferred my admission so I could talk to folks about that if they're interested in that. Yeah, law programs. You know, same as Grace. I'm in the public interest specialization. I'm in the critical race studies specialization, and I'm also part of the comparative, the international. I'm really butchering that specialization. I'm sorry to that program. And area study interest. I guess that kind of coincides with the orgs I participated in. So I'm currently the co-chair of community outreach, part of APILSA, our Asian Pacific Islander Student Law Association. I'm also the business manager of our Queer Trans People of Color Collective. I'm also a board member of our Tenants Law Association, and a bunch of other things, I guess, where I worked during my summer. So my first year, I worked at the LA office remotely of the US Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. I worked for a federal government. That was really interesting. But this summer, I'm going to be at Communities Resist. So they do anti-displacement, anti-gentrification work in New York City. Yeah, so I'm really interested in tenants and housing rights.
Thanks so much, Jackie. Another book of a resume. I feel like maybe like the model students we have for this are starting to scare the audience members. I just want everyone to know that like you don't need 3 specializations in law school, but we do have some overachievers here on the panel with us. A lot of students tend to ask, can you do more than 1 specialization specifically at UCLA? Yes, you can. Most of us are in CRS, that's critical race studies, and other overlapping specializations. Okay, so moving right along, I want to go to Latrel. Can you introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Latrel Powell. I use he, him pronouns. I'll be graduating from UCLA in 2022. So I'm a 2L, AKA second year law student. I'm from the East Bay area. So I moved around a bunch too in high school and stuff. So if you're from the East Bay, shout out some cities. I probably lived there. I went to undergrad at San Diego State University. I studied political science and Africana studies as a double major, honors interdisciplinary studies minor. I also didn't take any gap years. I went straight through. So I think the phrasing Jackie uses, it's interesting. The specialization that I'm also in the Public Interest Law and Policy program, PILP, as well as the CRS program. So I'm doing both specializations. Some orgs that I participated in, I primarily participated in BLSA, BLSA, a Black Law Students Association. I was the political activism chair this past year. And yeah, I was the first person to do that, at least like within the past few years. So that was kind of a journey in and of itself. And then I've also been working with the UCLA criminal justice program as a student researcher on trying to develop like a Know Your Rights app for youth that are impacted by the juvenile justice system. I started that position pretty recently. And places I've worked, I was in the UCLA Voting Rights Project this past semester and in the clinic trying to assist with like redistricting and bringing claims about like like gerrymandered cities from across the country. I also was working at Public Advocates this past summer on their Metropolitan Equity team, primarily focused on affordable housing and development in the Bay Area. I'll be working this upcoming summer at Public Council as a member of their community development project. So working on like inclusive development and economic development, trying to integrate grassroots organizations as formal nonprofits and helping with some like the transaction work there, as well as other community-led efforts. And I will also be a summer fellow at the Rennie Public Law Group this upcoming summer, so like boutique organization, law firm that focuses on like local government law. So I'll just get a lot of exposure there, probably meet folks from all over the Bay Area community about, taking on challenges in my hometown. So that's some of the work that I've done. As a student researcher in undergrad, did a lot of like student government stuff. Yeah, looking forward to this panel and getting to know you all better with your questions and everything.
Yes, this panel of overachievers, and I love each and every one of you, but this means that the introductions go on forever because you guys do so much amazing stuff. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Ronak now.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ronak Patel. I use he, him pronouns. I am also a second-year law student at 2L. I'm originally from New Jersey, just outside of New York City. I went to school at Northwestern. I graduated back in 2015, so a little while ago, and majored in political science and economics with a minor in math. During my gap years of 4 years, I worked in consulting and tech, very different from what I'm doing now, because I also am in the CRS and public interest law program here at UCLA. Like Grace, I'm also one of the co-chairs for the National Lawyers Guild. I'm also the co-chair for the South Asian Law Students Association, and the incoming editor-in-chief of the Asian Pacific American Law Journal. I do have a couple other things, but I think those are the ones that have really shaped my law school experience. This last summer, I was working at Latino Justice Pro Lep's Florida office, working on litigation on helping people access the ballot during COVID-19 because Florida has horrendous voting laws. This coming summer, I'm going to be continuing doing voting rights work at the ACLU Voting Rights Project.
Great, thanks so much, Ronak. And then last but not least, my homegirl, Stephany. I know we're the only 3Ls on this panel, but if you could introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Yeah, so my name is Stephany Martinez. Like Ryan said, we're the only 3Ls on this panel, so I'm graduating this year. My hometown is San Francisco, so I'm from the Bay Area. Shout out Latrel. I went to UC Berkeley and I majored in interdisciplinary studies, and then I had a minor in global poverty and practice. Let me see what else. Okay, so I took a gap year of 2 years. So I graduated in 2015. And so I also deferred like Jackie, so I can talk more about that. For me, it was just about money. Yeah, we'll talk more about it throughout the panel, I'm sure, but I'm happy to talk about deferring. I'm in the public interest specialization. I came in, trying to do public interest specialization and CRS, but I did not meet all the CRS requirements because there were just too many classes that I wanted to take. So I'm just finishing up the public interest specialization now. I was the Women of Color Collective co-chair last year, and the chief articles editor of the UCLA Law Review. And then I've also been a Law Fellows mentor, and I was also a mentee. So if there's any Law Fellows mentee out there, shout out to you too. During my 1L summer, I externed for a judge in the Northern District, so in San Francisco. And this past summer, I was a summer associate at Kecker, Van Ness and Peters, which is a trial litigation firm. And that's it.
Great, thanks so much, Stephany. And yeah, shout out to the law fellows here. Shout out to Leo. I don't know if he's speaking today, but we can definitely put some information about law fellows in the chat. And that kind of helps me transition into the next question, because there are these types of pre-law programs and prep programs. And as you can see here, there's people on this panel who have gone straight through to law school, people who've taken gap years. I took 5 years off in between. I got a master's degree, so I understand the gap year thing. So my next question will be, at what point did you decide to pursue law school? I know I've come into contact with a lot of people who always knew they wanted to go to law school. I was adamantly against going to law school for the longest time because I didn't know public interest law existed. And so I know we each have our own different kind of path and journey. And so I was wondering if Jackie and then Stephany, you can discuss this question. At what point did you decide to go to law school? How did you choose which schools to apply to? And what resources did you use when you were applying?
Yes, so I'm also a law fellows mentee and a mentor. So at what point did you decide? I don't know. That's really not helpful. But I think it sounds really cheesy, but I decided I wanted to go to law school because I was like, oh, if not me, then who? Especially working with attorneys, I kind of saw like people's lack of criticality, and seeing that I think if I, are able to have the tools to be able to like help the people in my community and in other marginalized communities, then that would be worth it. So after I graduated from undergrad, I was like, I'm never going back to school again. And even all of my friends now are like, didn't you say you're never going to go back to school? But here you are, like pursuing a law degree. Well, UCLA was my top choice, mostly because LA is home and I had already built a community here before I decided to go to law school, because I was pursuing a very specific thing. It helped that I had folks, in LA that I knew that were doing the work that I saw myself doing in the future. And the critical race studies program at UCLA is why I was attracted to UCLA. Yeah, I mean, law fellows was huge. I think for me, having a mentor who was like another like queer person of color, kind of doing it, and we like had very similar politics. So for me, my biggest frustration and concern was going to be like, well, like law and studying law in this institution is so a complete exact opposite of who I am and what I believe in. But like seeing her able to do it, I mean, she told me I was going to struggle a lot, which was very true. But that was, yeah. And I think just talking to, like, I haven't really met an attorney in my life until I got into the law fellows program. So I like definitely like had no idea, how to even like go about like applying. So I think having that resource is super helpful, or like actually talking to law students, actually talking to attorneys, of people who actually done it is super helpful. I kind of advise not going down the Reddit rabbit hole of the law school admissions. I have done it, even though people have suggested not to. But sometimes at 2 a.m. you like, it happens. I understand. Yeah. I'll pass the baton to Stephany.
Cool, thanks, Jackie. So I guess mine is kind of cheesy too. Like I had like a childhood dream of being a lawyer, and I think it was because of the way that different lawyers came into my life at different points in my childhood, and they were usually like badass women of color. So, like I really wanted to emulate them. And then once I was in college, that's when I started thinking about whether I was going to go to law school or go into academia actually. So thinking about, you know, maybe getting a PhD or something like that. But again, like I'm a first generation college graduate, so I had no idea of like both fields at that point. So what I did was I decided to get a job in an immigration law firm, and that was really helpful in just exposing me to the legal field and yeah, seeing if it was something I wanted to do, and it was, you know, really exciting to be there. So I think that's when I started looking at applying seriously, and also looking at yeah, what I wanted to do in the legal field. Let's see. And I think in terms of choosing schools, I talked a lot to a mentor. So I had a really great mentor from undergrad who went to UC Berkeley undergrad and then UC Berkeley for law school. So we just connected, and she was part of one of the student organizations that I was part of in undergrad. And so she was, you know, really, I think, one of the reasons that I was able to apply and know like which schools would be something that would benefit me. And then honestly, I think like as a first generation college student, I did look a lot at rankings, because I did think that was something that was important for me to be able to get a job, because I didn't have a network or connections to help me find a job after law school and all of this incredible debt. Let's see, what else? Yeah, so the resources, yeah, like I said, that mentor who's like, you know, such a great friend to this day, and has been there through all of my law school woes when I was just really frustrated with law school. I think I also like leaned heavily on people from work who were attorneys, and just getting help with applying and my applications, and, you know, getting letters of rec. And then lastly, I think the law fellows were a great help. So just like reaching out to Leo, and before that, Monica used to be here, so I would reach out to her a lot. And just through each step of like, you know, taking the LSAT and like which prep course to do, I would always just like reach out to them.
Thanks so much, Stephany. I see we have some new questions coming into the chat, so I want to try to answer some of those if we have time, but I do want to move on to a really important topic, because this is one of the most asked about things when we do these types of panels. And so I want to direct this question at Latrel and Ronak. Let's talk about the LSAT. So can you share with our audience what program you used, what your study program looked like, how long did you study, how many times did you take it, and then what do you wish you would have done differently? So let's go ahead and start with Latrel and then go to Ronak.
Okay, I'm glad we're starting with me, because I'm gonna tell everyone what not to do, and then Ronak will tell you what to do. So I got going straight through. I made the brilliant decision to start studying for the LSAT during August of my senior year of undergrad, and I took the LSAT in November. And so I took my first my diagnostic exam to like kind of get like what my score was in like mid-August. And then I was like, you know what? I have about 10 weeks to just like take these practice tests, study, all of that. Did not happen. So I took a practice test like every single week, and my score literally stayed the same. And it ended up being the exact score that I got come November. So I'm happy to tell anybody what my score is, whether in the chat or whatever. But I'm sure for those who are looking into schools, if you're doing your research, you'll see that each university has like a median score, and you know, like that'll kind of give you like a goal to shoot for. So I think UCLA's at the time when I was applying was around like 168 or 169 median. And I got a 157 on my LSAT exam. So it's like 70th percentile, enough to feel good about myself, but also enough to feel like I didn't do enough. And so I will say that trying to study like in between classes and throughout my senior year, which I was like very active, I just did not allow myself enough space to take on that kind of monster of an exam. So for any of you who've kind of taken some practice tests or trying to study thus far and are getting frustrated about like your progress, I completely understand. I still have some of that frustration. It's completely justified. Don't feel like you have to be perfect in your approach. But I always do tell folks that when you're studying for the exam, to the best of your ability, try to make some space for yourself for that to be a primary focus, because it does have a significant impact on your application, and it does have a significant impact on even like potential scholarship opportunities and things like that. I'm not saying that to scare anyone. I as well as like as much as the next person, I am frustrated about the LSAT, and I think it's arbitrary, but I do like to speak honestly about kind of what my journey was like. And so I feel like I didn't really offer myself enough space to really get into it. I think I was using Khan Academy. And then my like one of my closest friends, she had a private tutor. And I was like, oh, well, any questions I have, I'll just ask her. It just, things are like too hectic for that kind of stuff to work out. So when I've talked to some of my classmates, there's been recommendations like to do Kaplan or to do some of the the well-recognized courses. But I think a big thing is just the kind of like environment that you have accessible to you to really lock in on the LSAT. And I understand that's like really difficult because not all of us have that kind of space or the kind of resources for that. But yeah, so that was kind of my journey with the LSAT. The test is extremely frustrating. Still is to this day. I get PTSD when people are like, yo, like logic games, how did you do? I'm like, I've suppressed it out of my memory a long time ago. But yeah, so I'll pass it on to Ronak.
Yeah, I think I also did not do it the right way. Just to build off what Latrel was just saying, I think in addition to like giving yourself space, realize what works for you when you study. I signed up for PowerScore's like virtual classes because my job like didn't have me stably in one place week to week. And it was great, except I couldn't attend them half the time, which kind of defeated the point of paying for a class because of like life and work did not allow it. And so for me, I'm someone who just like kind of needs to lock myself in a room and sit with a book for a couple hours. And like that was what it turns out worked for me. So I started doing it like that and as opposed to like using the class as like the primary method of studying for the test. I took it twice, once in September and once in November. And I think the biggest thing that I should have done, and I would recommend you all do, is just kind of stick to some sort of schedule. So like Latrell was saying, he would take a practice test each week. I had that goal, never happened. But definitely keep to some sort of schedule in which you're persistently going over the same material, because at the end of the day, like these tests are arbitrary and they're designed to benefit the people who have the most time to commit to repeating the exercise over and over again. It's not about your intelligence or your ability to be a lawyer or practice in the future. It's your ability to sit down and take this test. So I definitely recommend carving out, like if it's 10 weeks or 2 months or a month or whatever, that time that you know you're going to have downtime in the rest of your life, in your personal life and work at school, and then committing the couple hours a day to get there. Because what I ended up doing was setting a 10-week schedule, really just doing everything in the last 3 or 4 weeks before each test. And like it worked out, I'm here, but I know I could have done better and be a lot less stressed out had I stuck to a schedule that worked for me. Because you all will have years and years of study under your belt by the time you're taking this test. You know what study habits work for you and which ones don't. Stick to them and like don't try to reinvent the wheel. Yeah, also recommend PowerScore a lot. I think there's a lot of tools out there, a lot of different companies. Kaplan, I think, was mentioned earlier. I would recommend just getting the PowerScore books, regardless of if you do a class. They're not too bad, and I think a lot of libraries had them, so I know I borrowed them a couple times. So that's definitely something I would also recommend.
Thanks so much, Ronak. And Latrell, thank you for sharing that with us. I also just want to throw out there, I got a 158. So, you know, people think that there's certain cutoffs or that you have to reach a certain score. That's just not true. There is like a holistic way that some admissions looks at your applications. And so while I'm sure everyone on this panel wants you to do the best as possible, because higher LSAT unfortunately means better chances of admission, better chances of getting more money, more scholarships, don't count yourself out and don't close the door on yourself. You know, like don't close an opportunity without even trying, because you never know what's going to happen. And so that being said, I want to now move on to Grace and Stephany. If both of you could share your experiences with how you crafted your application. Did you create a narrative? Were you trying to fit the class profile, or did you already fit the class profile? What did you do differently? What did you do basically to kind of what we say, like sell yourself in your admissions application cycle? And, you know, a lot of people feel really bound by the statistics, the medians and all of that. And as you can see, a lot of us here weren't in those medians or weren't above them. And so Grace, if I could start with you in discussing some of that.
Yeah, I was laughing really hard when Latrel was explaining his experience, because I was like, literally as a straight through, that was my exact same experience, same timeline, everything. As a first generation student, I kind of decided to apply to law school pretty late in the game. Well, like in August was when I officially decided, and I didn't really know how to do that. And I just like am echoing everybody else's, like go to do like law fellows. I did a specific pipeline to law program run by an org that focuses on Native law students. And that for me was, I think without that, I wouldn't have been successful in applying to law school, because I had no idea what I was doing. And they really helped me with several things. One, they provided a free LSAT class, which is the only time I studied was when I went to those classes. And as a low-income student, I had 4 part-time jobs at the time. If you think I'm an overachiever now, I was an overachiever then. So I was in multiple student orgs, and I kind of knew that my LSAT score was not going to be amazing. The first time I took a practice test, it was a 148. I did end up, through literally just taking those classes and doing a practice test every week, getting to a 154 was my final LSAT score in November. But I kind of knew ahead of time, because I knew I was not good at standardized tests. I knew I was going to have the time that was going to be my weakest part. The GPA I think that I ended up applying with was a 3.6, which is not a bad GPA at all, but it's, I think it's like in the middle, I want to say, of their, at least at the time I was applying, their GPA. UCLA is my first choice too. UCLA and some other orgs, some others law schools I was looking at, what they accept. And so I knew that that my LSAT score was going to be my weakest, and that my GPA was going to be okay, but not the best. And so I knew going in that I was going to have to really focus on my personal statement, my diversity statement. I ended up putting in something called an LSAT addendum, which is basically just like literally a 1-pager explaining your LSAT score. And so for me, that was really, like I was bad at standardized testing. I got a 24 on the ACT, but my GPA was still like good in college, and I still was really successful in college. I might have a bad LSAT score, but I had research experience, and I had critical thinking skills, like recommendation letters that highlighted that some other students might not have, and other things that law schools look for. So I focused on that. And then I really, honestly, from August to when I submitted my application in early December, really focused on my personal statement and diversity statement, crafting it, drafting it, multiple drafts. I went through my university's writing center. I went to like career counselors who like had worked with lawyers or who had been lawyers. I went to professors. I had my mom read it. Like I literally had probably 20 people read each of these documents to make sure that they made sense, to make sure that they told like a really compelling story about why they should accept me, but also what I could give the law school. There are obviously not a lot of students of color in these predominantly white law schools. And so I could provide that perspective. I could provide the perspective of somebody who's been houseless in their childhood. And so I kind of just really hammered in on those experiences and how those would contribute to the law school. So yeah, I think I agree with what Ryan said, that it's more of a holistic approach. And at the end of the day, if you come up with an LSAT score that is below, mine's way, I think like the median's like a 157 at the lowest range. Mine's way below that. And so even if you have one below, I would still give it a chance. The most they could do is say no, and then you try again. So yeah, I definitely agree with that. Stephany, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, I know we're running short on time, so I'll just echo a lot of what Grace said. I think one of the things I'll say is keep your personal statement to a simple narrative. Like we're all really nuanced human beings, but you want to present a story to these admissions people that is just like clear and, you know, showing who you are in a narrative form that's going to be like readable when they're reading a ton of other personal statements too. And then in terms of the class profile, I'll say that other parts of my application, like grades and, you know, different extracurriculars and things, did kind of match up with the class profile and were pretty strong, but my LSAT wasn't strong either. So it's really not like the LSAT isn't the end all be all, but of course it comes into play in terms of scholarships. So you should all think about, you know, trying your best, but don't keep yourself out of applying because of your LSAT score. And the other thing is that I didn't do this while I was applying, but, you know, being a Law Fellows mentor, I heard this advice given to other people, and it was to reach out to, if you're interested, like for example in the critical race studies program or the public interest program, reaching out to the directors of those programs and talking about your interest, because they will advocate for you in the admissions process. And yeah, so I heard people give out that advice, and I think that was the case for me too, where I had people advocating for me as part of the public interest program.
Thanks, Stephany. And yeah, that's a really good point. As a Law Fellows mentor, as a previous UCLA AP Law mentor, I put a lot of people in touch with the directors of those programs, and I think it really went a long way. But now I kind of want to move on and just do a roundtable on, you know, we're all here for one reason. We're all people of color. We're talking to students of color that are prospective law students. And again, one of the biggest questions we always get is, why did you choose UCLA Law, first of all? And what was your experience like being a person of color here in this environment? You know, just speaking for myself, I came to UCLA as an undergrad. I knew what the big college campus was like, but I hadn't fully prepared myself for the bubble that was law school and really, really being underrepresented. So personal anecdote, like as a 1L in a section of about 80 students, I was one of 2 Latinas, and I was one of 2 people that identified as Indigenous in a room full of 80 people. And so if that's overwhelming for you, I'm so sorry. It's the reality of the situation we put ourselves in. But I do want people to go in with that information, kind of knowing what you're getting yourself into, because you can build community like we've done here, but that doesn't mean it's not hard at times. And so with those questions about why did you choose the UCLA Law community and what have your experiences like, I'm just gonna go in the order that's on my screen. Latrel, Grace, Stephany, Ronak, and then Jackie.
Okay. Yes, very important question. Probably one of the most important ones for me, but I know we're running short on time and I don't want to start any fights right now. So similar to Ryan, I was one of 3 Black students in a classroom of 80 people. I was the only Black man in the room. So just kind of like an insight of what 1L law classes look like. You're reading cases that sometimes are written by judges, you know, as early as the 1800s. And so just a simple, you know, analysis on like what our country's history has gone through. It is really, really difficult when you realize you're bringing a perspective and analysis, especially a critical one, and you feel so isolated. And so, yeah, like coming into it, I've gone to, you know, institutions within the state of California for a long time. So I was never disillusioned about like a predominantly white space and otherwise known as like liberal state, big air quotes on that. So I just think that I've done so much growth as a law student as far as not only, you know, my skills, my technical skills, my legal analysis, but also with my politics. I'm currently in therapy right now. I think it's been necessary for me to be able to have that kind of resource, and I'm very grateful for it because, I mean, Jackie can tell you all stories about, you know, phone calls that I've had well after midnight with her, just struggling to get through law school, not only as a student, but as a human being. It's really difficult. And I just want to say that, you know, we do have a really, really strong critical race studies program, do have a really strong public interest law and policy program, but the dynamics of disproportionate amounts of labor being put on marginalized communities, poor communities, on Black and Brown communities are still very real within the law school. I mean, it's a white institution that operates with, typically, white methods of operation and facilitation. And so those things aren't magically eradicated here. Those are real challenges that we deal with. And so, if anyone is interested in having like more robust conversations about that, be happy to get into contact with you all, because it is real. And I know that the way that we each engage with that is very intimate. And so, we can't speak on it, within the span of 2 minutes, but it is a very real dynamic. But I am so grateful for the community I've been able to build here, especially the people on this panel, and some of my classmates that are doing other things with their Saturday as well. As I've met some incredible people here, really intelligent people and really caring people.
I wish I weren't going after Latrel. Latrel is one of the most like well-spoken, like articulated people that I know, who can just like articulate things that I can't. So I'll try to do my best. But yeah, I think going off of that, law school has been so difficult for me, and just like, again, like Jackie is like my confidant, like we were in a section together, and from literally day one I've been complaining to her, but we both talk about how violent law school has been for us. There is no other word other than violent, spiritually, emotionally, and because of that, physically. And so it's been really difficult to navigate. I was the only 1L Native student. And again, like I also acknowledge my immense privilege in being light, but having like a perspective that is different from people and not having it, not even honored in class, but also not having another 1L to turn to who is Native and who understands those experiences and those perspectives was really isolating and just really, I think, hard for me to cope with. And it manifested in definitely real and physical, mental illnesses and depression, etc. And so that has been really difficult to deal with. I will say the upside of that is UCLA Law is probably one of the better law schools in terms of attracting students who are like me, who are passionate and caring and loving and work from a place of love. So it's easier to find community. So everyone in this panel is in my community, and I turn to everybody on this panel whenever I am experiencing those emotions. Like Latrel, I have a therapist, an Indigenous therapist who roots me and who keeps me grounded and who I work through these issues with. I talk to my mom every week and I'm reminded of why I'm here. And so it's manageable, and it's able to be survived. That doesn't mean that it's not difficult. And I think that that is something that I wish I really understood before coming to law school. Because yeah, everyone says it's hard. All your mentors say it's going to be difficult, but as like a student of color, and particularly as an Indigenous person, I think that it's violent in a way that can't be explained by somebody who doesn't have those experiences and that identity. And so, yeah, I think before law school, I would have done more to like mentally prepare myself for that. But again, I think the upside is that I have created amazing friends. And yeah, law school has pushed me politically to really think about what I stand for and why I'm here. And that has been invaluable to me and will make me a better advocate. So I'm really thankful for that experience, and happy to talk more about that. I'll put my email in the chat.
Am I next? Sorry, I forgot the order. Yes. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I think I came to UCLA because of, the great thinkers that are here. Like Jennifer Chacon was like somebody who I was just like stalking constantly. And then we poached her right when I was going to start 1L. So it was just like really exciting to be able to have the opportunity to take a class with her. I remember like going to her office and just knocking on her door while she was doing research and being like, I want to talk to you during 1L. So that was just like one of the reasons that I was excited to come to law school and, was excited for UCLA. And yeah, so great professors, a ton of people in like the public interest specialization and the CRS specialization. I will say that the same thing as the other panelists have expressed, there was a lot of difficulty, my 1L, and things that affected my mental health. I also have a therapist, so like, it's not a coincidence that the people of color on this panel had or are in therapy, which is great because we're like focusing time on ourselves and becoming better people. But yeah, it's been a challenge, but I know anyone who wants to do it, you can do it. Like, if we're all getting through it and we're all becoming better people, you can too. But yeah, I will say that coming in, I didn't appreciate all of the stress that it would be to go through law school and like the imposter syndrome, because I just had such a great experience in undergrad that I was like, oh, okay, well, it'll be hard, but I can still do it. So it's different going through it, but you can get through, and I believe in all of you.
Yeah. For me, I kind of just ended up at UCLA Law. I had a really scattershot approach to applying to law schools where, like Stephany was saying before, I was super, like, thought the rankings meant something. They don't, they're just a thing. So I applied to everywhere, like I think the top 20, anywhere that would give me a fee waiver, and then a bunch of law schools near the tri-state, New Jersey and New York, so I could stay near home. And UCLA like was the school that accepted me, and it worked out perfectly because, like everybody was previously saying, the CRS and public interest law programs were just perfect fits, and definitely places I found community, which I don't think I would have gotten at most of the other schools I applied to. I also think I got really lucky because I want to do voting rights related stuff, and the UCLA voting rights project is like one of the only like institutions at a major law school, or actually, to be honest, it's actually in the policy school, but we can, it's neither here nor there. But it was a really great way that I can get like straight litigation experience in the exact subject area I want to, while still a law student. And me and Latrel were in that clinic last semester, and it was really great to actually like be able to work on the stuff that I came here to work on, as opposed to like sit through 80% doctrinal classes that have nothing to do with what I want to do. I would also say, like, coming to UCLA Law, I know I felt really isolated the first week. I remember like thinking to myself, walking into the courtyard, being like, man, this is a lot of white people. This is like, even like someone who went to like a very white undergraduate institution and grew up in a very white community, it was still like kind of like, this is very weird. And so that definitely was something that like took me aback the first week. But really soon after, like Grace was saying, I think I found my community both in my identity orgs, but then like just cross everywhere. And I know we all work really hard to put on events together and work together to kind of make community for all people of color at UCLA Law. And I think that's something that, had I gone back and really looked at it, I would have made the same decision, and I wouldn't have kind of fallen into it. But I'm happy I made that decision. And I think it is hard, like I think Grace was saying this before, because like most of the law, and Latrel was saying this as well, is so old and written by white judges that did not have even fathom citizenship for the rest of us, or the right to speak or the right to argue for the rest of us. So a lot of the law is violent and outdated and antiquated. And especially when you're in classes that don't interest you and you have to sit there and listen to that. It's definitely something that like you're gonna, regardless of where you go to law school, you're gonna experience. So it's really nice to be at UCLA to have a community I can lean back on when that happens.
Yeah, I don't want to repeat what folks said, but yeah, law school sucks. And I mean, I don't know how else to put it. And I feel like that's also coming from someone who is a light-skinned East Asian. And so what that means for me to feel like this place is very spiritually violent. And what would it be for other people to like navigate those spaces? But I do things like, I didn't really care about like the doctrinal classes, like the ones that you take in 1L, were like not the way it was taught. And I remember I like reached out to like Grace, because I think maybe the first or second day she made a comment in our property class about like land rights and like colonization and settler like colonialism. And then I like went to her after class and I was like, Grace, me too. Also decolonial, I don't know, I say some, I don't even know what I said. And so that's how we became friends. But yeah, I mean, I went to school in the whitest state in the United States. And so I was like, yeah, like going to LA is going to be like home. I have family here. It's a public school. with like a really robust like critical race studies program, and like none of that really mattered. Like I felt the same kind of like spiritual and academic like violence that I was feeling in a small like PWI predominantly white institution. And you know, I'm always also reminded that like not all skin folk are kinfolk. So I keep, you know, like I try to still continually trying to reconcile what it would mean for me to be an agent of the state, and what that means for my own personal like politics and beliefs, but also understanding that like it actually is really nice for my family to, you know, in the hopefully in the future like know an attorney. And you know, like those things matter, to have someone in the community to be like, hey, like, can I help with this? And even it might be something that I don't practice, like I would have other people that I know who can, you know, provide resource, and those things are really important. And so I think that's why I chose like law school in general. And also I chose UCLA because it was kind of like the only school that accepted me. So sometimes like a choice is forced upon you in a way. But yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, Jackie. UCLA was also the only school that accepted me, but because I only applied to UCLA Law. And so don't do that to the audience members. Don't only apply to one school because you think you only want to go to your dream school. What that meant for me is no leverage when I was trying to negotiate more funding, no real options of thinking of going to other schools. So I hope that y'all learn from my mistake. I do want to move on to answering as many of the questions as we can in the Q&A before time runs out. So I'm going to quickly answer one live that was directed towards me. Someone asked what my master's program was. I got in Master of Arts in Religion, and my concentration was Asian religions from Yale. I studied religion as an undergrad, and I thought I wanted to be a professor. And I mostly used religion to study human rights issues internationally, decided that I didn't really want to do academia. I wanted a different career path, that was introduced to public interest law. And, you know, there's a big debate over going to law school, getting your JD. Are you going to work in corporate law or big law? Are you going to do public interest? And I really wanted something that I was passionate about, but that I could be financially stable in if I needed to fall back on something. And I know a lot of different panelists have talked about like different financial barriers and things like that. And so I do kind of want to get into some of that stuff, because some of the questions, the same themes are running through, is like, how did you decide to be an advocate and still go to law school? And I know a few people talked about deferring. And so if we could kind of, I'm going to kind of let the panelists decide who wants to discuss some of those things. So just go ahead and unmute if you want to jump in.
I can quickly talk about deferring. So I got in late to UCLA, and by that point, you know, I was just like thinking about like reapplying basically. And so for me, it made sense to take a year off to defer my admissions once I got in, and then take that time to just save money. And that's what I did. I just like worked and saved money and like kind of relaxed, and knew that I had a plan set for after that year was up.
Students have also asked in the Q&A about working during school. I think it's pretty universal that most 1Ls, if not all, do not work or are encouraged not to work. A lot of us here have worked part-time during our 2L and 3L years. A lot of people have tried to, you know, get that corporate law money during the summer, which is great too if you need that. But I do kind of want to go back to, wow, there's a lot of questions in the Q&A. Students were asking what resources you used during law school. Someone asked, how did you prepare mentally for the law school process? I didn't, right? I just like jumped in and was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I didn't know I needed to prepare mentally. Oh, but besides therapy, what other resources outside of the law school have you used to help navigate law school? Grace, do you want to answer that? I see you nodding.
Yeah. A little like informal. It's not like a particular resource, but this also kind of goes back to being an agent of the state. I identify as an abolitionist, and that's something that's really important to me. And there's actually, while it's like kind of difficult, I think, like in the law school, like like the way that it is to find other abolitionists, maybe not students, but like professionals, there's actually a good network of professionals who are abolitionists and who have like the perspective of understanding, I think, the violence of the state, but also working as a lawyer. And so a big thing for me is reaching out to lawyers who are also abolitionists or who are people of color and who have the same political ideology that I have, and just like listening to them. It's kind of like what Jackie said. It's like, if I don't go to law school, who else is going to go to law school? It's like some other non-abolitionist or somebody who doesn't have these perspectives or who doesn't have these values. And so I think just like talking to those people, they really encouraged me to keep going, and also have given me strategies and tools to figure out how to keep going and how to sustain my life and sustain my mental health, while also having these ideals and being in a place that kind of almost asks you to shut down those ideals. And so that's been something that's been really important to me, is I think just creating community in the law school, outside of the law school, and just in general, and creating people who will understand you and see you as you are and acknowledge that, and understand you in ways that maybe other aspects of law school does not. And that's been really sustainable for me, just to have those mentors and those people that I could rely on.
Definitely. Thanks so much. Does anyone else want to share any resources or kind of ways that they got through? I see a cat walking through. A lot of us have therapy animals that we've been spending a lot of time with during quarantine, or during this pandemic. But yeah, a lot of questions about kind of like, how'd you prepare mentally? Again, reiterating that I didn't, but you definitely should, which is why I recommend gap years. I don't know if anyone wants to speak more on that, but I loved my gap years. Someone asked like, what positions did you do to prepare you for law school? I was like a personal assistant and babysitter. Like, I did nothing that really prepared me for law school. So don't feel like you need to do one certain thing. I think I wanted to do maybe what Stephany did and get that like legal experience. Didn't, jumped in, still kind of don't know what I'm doing sometimes. So I hope that gives some of you hope that you can figure it out along the way. And yeah, building community is like really helpful and supportive. But outside of the law school, I don't know, it's tough. Does anyone want to jump in and answer that before we transition?
Yeah, I can answer quickly, just saying like having a support of people outside of law school. So like I love all my law school friends, and like, you know, they've been such a great support while they're there. But I think I also know myself, and I'm like extremely introverted. And a lot of like my childhood friends and my friends from college and like my family knows that. So what I did during 1L when I was really overwhelmed was just kind of lean on them, and you know, they just like babied me, which was what I needed at the time. So you know, have that support outside of law school if you can, nearby, to just like, you know, have people to remind you that there's a world outside of the curve.
I would just add that one of the most helpful things that's been shared for me with like in terms of perspective when I was applying is that law school will always be there. So to never feel the pressure to be this perfect person for law school, because one, that's not real, two, that's not important, and three, you are more important than preparing yourself for any one program or institution or degree. And so really just having the peace of mind with yourself that like you are entitled to like pursue law school for your passions, and like that is completely all you need. I've met people from all kinds of backgrounds. I've met folks with 10 plus years of work experience. I've met folks that are younger than me, even though I went straight through. And so there's all walks of life, and it'll always be here. So I know that these kind of application cycles, you can tend to ask yourself like, what do I need to do to get ready? But just to remind you to center yourself and really be at peace with yourself, and be confident that you are taking all the steps necessary. And for the more technical questions, that's what we're here for, right? And as far as like your personal statement, LSAT recommendations, things like that. But yeah, you don't owe anything to law school. It's a potential path but it's just one of many.
Yes, Latrel, you don't owe anything to these institutions. And, you know, I've told this story a lot of times of we've all gotten accepted, we've all cried, or we've all thought this or this, but like these schools are lucky to have us, right? Like when you get accepted, like this school wants you to come. And so I need y'all to be confident and step up and start asking for like what you deserve. It's not just getting admitted, but it's getting that funding, it's getting that institutional support that we're all here fighting for. I'm going to transition over, but I just really quickly want to note something Latrel was talking about, all walks of life. We have, there was a student that was 17 years old in my section. There were students that were in their late 30s. We have people that have kids, that are married, that have already been through divorces, like all walks of life, people. There's definitely a lot of information of that online. But again, I just want to remind everyone that like, these schools are lucky to have you. Like when I get my degree in a month, like the honor will be UCLA's once again. Like, so don't forget that, like we are valuable and you deserve to be here and you can definitely do this and you will find your community. And we're waiting for you to come join us in this community. Like whether or not you go to UCLA, whether or not you practice in our field, you're going to be our colleagues in the future. And there's people who love and support you already. So I just want to thank all the panelists for being here today. Thank you for sharing your experiences. It can be really vulnerable to do this sometimes, but we've all had great mentors and we all have great community that have showed us that this is necessary for survival. So yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and hand it over to Katie to introduce the next panel. And again, thank you all for having me.